Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. Today I spoke with Benjamin, and Benjamin has a book coming out. It's available now, and he has this remarkable position that he has been taking photographs since the 70s, right up till 2022. And he's a landscape photographer and has focused a lot of his attention in and around Florida. And we had a good chat about what he's seen, what he knows, and how things have changed. And it's worth listening to. Hello again. Welcome to the David Watson podcast. Thank you for coming on. My apologies that might be the most exciting thing you do today. But I do appreciate the compliment. How are you doing?
I'm just fine. Happy to be able to look at a beautiful day like this with ice and snow everywhere.
So you were just literally telling me about the last hurricane that came through, and that was hurricane which one?
That was Hurricane Helene.
Helene.
And like most of them, they start down in the Atlantic and come up into the Gulf. And usually they just fizzle out and die over dry land. They often don't travel, but I'll get right into climate change for you. Nice segue. As the um, uh, waters, especially the Gulf of Mexico, have warmed with climate change, um, they gain strength in the Gulf. And Helene just went into Florida near where my family live. I have a couple of family that lost their homes. And then Helene went straight up here. And I'm hours and hours and hours away from the coast, either
Mm.
coast, the Gulf Coast or the Atlantic coast, and caused an awful lot of damage and death. And one of the main reasons was that we'd had storms, showers for several days prior, so the earth was completely saturated, and entire mountainsides just went down into the valley, washed down with the flood, and um, the winds were incredible, and there were trees down everywhere for a couple of months.
Yeah. So,
They don't usually come up here, so it's just a sign of worsening storms.
so you used the term a segue into climate change. What are you describing as climate change? Just so we know where we are.
Worsening storms is a big one. Being hot um, all the time. That's part of what's happened. That then causes the polar ice caps to melt and sea levels to rise. And the book that I've completed last year covers that exact thing, the impact of climate change, i.e., or more specifically, rising sea levels as a result of melting glaciers have gone into low-lying shores all around the world, and that happened to be one of the places where I photographed a lot in Florida.
Okay, because the last check I did, the ice caps were bigger than 20 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. But do you know what I mean? It's not one of the things that interests me with climate change because I had a very interesting conversation with a guy called Jace Jason Edwards. He's a photographer for National Geographic, and he was talking about climate acceleration because of the human population and that's where there's an impact from humans. But we were what I'm interested in is um, where you are with if humans didn't exist, do you think there would be no climate change?
Oh, I think, and the big,
Yeah.
big, big picture. I'm not really capable of saying, but from my research, and my research has all been on this specific area that I photographed for 47 years.
Mm.
Um, that is warming, and it's the sea level is the shore is completely flat. It's a wetlands area,
Yeah.
and so if there's any increase in the warmth of our planet and our atmosphere, in trapped gases, then the seas are going to rise from melting glaciers, and that's exactly what's happened um, on this part of the Gulf Coast
Mm.
of Florida. It couldn't be any flatter.
Yeah.
And if there's any um, rise, the other end of this where I photographed is that there's been a lot of development inland, massive uh, housing projects, and they're taking the water out of the aquifer, which then allows the Gulf of Mexico, the water from the Gulf saltwater, to go into the aquifer.
Yeah. Because this is one of the things that fascinates me with the lake is I, I I have, I literally, I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know what the cause is. I'm a big believer in the Milanovich cycles, which is just the way that the Earth moves and rotates around the sun is probably one of the
Mhm.
biggest causes of climate. Well, we know it's a cause of climate change, but whether, and my question is always, if humans didn't exist, climate change would still happen. But I'm not saying we don't impact that. I'm just saying that it's like, where do we sit? And you just said something there, which I think is possibly one of the biggest issues that we have as a species is how we have the same problem in the UK. We have areas that are known as floodplains, and they're always in river valleys. And people keep building housing estates there. And then 5 years later, you see it on the news, climate change, people's houses are flooded out. No, no, those fields have been flooding for centuries, millennia, long before humans ever inhabited them. They are known bowls, they are known floodplains that every winter fill up with water from the rivers. And people are like, yeah, yeah, but no, no, you built an entire housing estate on there and put 5,000 homes down there. Where did you think the water was going to go in the winter? And it's just like, and the news say climate change. No, it's human stupidity. I'm not saying climate change isn't happening. I'm just saying we keep doing things to the environment and not actually respecting the environment and saying, hang on a second, this area of the environment serves a very natural purpose. We
Mhm.
need to stay out of it.
I agree. And building homes along flat coasts is
Mm.
stupid.
Yeah,
And where I grew up in Clearwater, Florida, there are um, there are some parts of that region that are a little steep, just old limestone, not even cliffs, hills right on a bay. But what I photographed for a very long time was remote and very susceptible. Every
yeah,
tiny little thing, water coming out for golf courses, or the new thing, quite a few, I mean, it's old now, but the state giving away um, the water in the aquifer for nothing
yeah,
to a bottled water company. So you take that water out and of the aquifer, and it allows the salt water to come in, flow upstream faster. And this, what I had learned about this in college in the 70s, and I believed or thought for some reason that it would happen generations from then, from back in the 70s. When I started photographing this in the impact 20 plus years ago, I was curious what I was photographing trees that were dead. There were miles and miles and miles of dead trees. Well, they weren't, those trees didn't like too much salt.
yeah,
And it's saltwater intrusion. It gets into the aquifer. And I sent photographs to the academic community in St. Petersburg, Florida, where I went to college. And they said, "Oh, that's saltwater intrusion. That's," and I said, "You mean that's happening now?" They said, "Yes." And I learned then that future that I'd learned about in the 70s, all these things were going to happen. It's happening now. And that was one of the reasons that I decided to take the time and photograph the evidence of this because I had learned again decades beforehand that this would happen. I didn't believe it was going to happen this soon, but it
Why?
is.
Why do you think? Because did you've been taking photographs since the 70s, right? So it's not statistical evidence. It's like, look, hey guys, here's 1980, here's 1990, here's 2000, 2010, 2000. Why do you think people just ignore it? It's, you know what I mean? Because it's literally there in front of them.
It is, and it. I run into it in so many different places. One, people like to be able to look at something and say, "Oh, this is what that is, and it happened because of this," and that's that. You know, but when they look at a photograph of um, uh, wetlands with a lot of dead trees, they don't understand that, and they don't do what I did. And what I did is only because I had learned these things in college, and that is to do a little research, ask the scientists, et cetera, et cetera. And I was horrified. I mean, this, I'm, straight white man, but I was very saddened by what I was seeing because this is my native um, landscape, and it was being ruined faster than I ever believed possible by something that I didn't know or understand. And you ask scientists, and I have a book published a year ago, and I got one of those scientists to contribute a study to the book so that it's for real, it's facts. The book has graphs and maps and
Yeah.
satellite images and all that. What they don't, and also that means that if someone doesn't want to agree with you about climate change, I believe they are just in a state of denial, and it's too large, it's too big a topic, and maybe their political party doesn't encourage them to think along those lines. I know one thing that I've run into as a photographer, there are venues, museums where I would like to show the work because I'm a landscape photographer and I feel that this is something
Yeah.
that people should know about. But I find that a lot of museums don't want to put the work in on their walls because the people that give the museum money to um, and donate work and who want to have a say um, based on their donations in what the museum shows, they don't want to show this work because it's very straightforward and it calls into doubt their beliefs that this isn't really happening.
I think some of the cynicism, and I don't know what the United States is like for that, but in the UK, we are constantly, every time they talk about something to do with climate change and net zero, it comes with, and we're going to tax you for this. And you're just like, right. So we're being taxed again for something that, and then, and I think the other issue is often when people are really outspoken, especially celebrities, they're also the ones with private jets and big super yachts telling the rest of us not to drive a car. And when you look at the mining impacts of trying to create lithium batteries for electric cars, there's no way that's about climate change because that's the destruction of those mines, sourcing rare minerals, and actually everything from smartphones to tablets. And it is. I think there. I think there is a huge hypocrisy um, with the people that promote the message, and by that I mean the millionaires, billionaires who talk about it whilst actually using it up. I mean, take Florida for example. Carbon footprint. Okay, carbon footprint was. Do you remember the BP oil spill? Uh, was
Yes.
about 20 years ago now, 25 years ago, something like that. Okay, so not many people know this. BP created the terminology carbon footprint. They teamed up with Ogilvy, it's Olgivy, and they're a PR company, and they came up.
Oh, look,
That's the one. Thank you. Um, and they came up with the term carbon footprint, and then they discovered that you could charge people for their carbon footprint, and it's not. There is no such thing. It was invented by a PR company. And again, my problem again is I'm not a climate change denier either. I'm saying like, hang on, like if you listen to a scientist called Randall Carlson, he talks about the big glaciers, the Younger Dryas effect about 12,000 years ago, meteor impact. And I've heard him debate scientists in the same field, same experts, same people, two different opinions. And he's like, I know I'm too dumb to know which one is the smart one.
it's always good to know that you don't have a grasp of it. And
But
for me,
what I'm saying is, you have two experts in the same field that don't
yeah.
agree, and I think that's where that causes a common problem, because who am I supposed to listen to?
As a citizen and as someone just trying to get through the day, get through the week, have a vacation, et cetera, et cetera, one doesn't have the time to digest,
Mm,
evaluate, do the research, et cetera, et cetera. They may rely on whoever was the last person that said something that resonated with them.
yeah,
Um, I That's why I only can do one thing in life. I've flubbed up a lot of other things, but the one thing I know how to do is make photographs,
yeah,
especially landscape photographs of especially where I grew up. And the only way I knew how to become comfortable with the ruin of a very big part of the Gulf Coast was to photograph and see it and paddle out and make photographs, either getting out into the swamp where the alligators and cottonmouth snakes are, or to photograph from the canoe and show that this does exist
yeah,
and this is how I see it. And it's real. And this is what's causing it. And a good deal of it is I mentioned this before, is um, in Florida, specifically where I was photographing, the state allowing stupidly um, too much water to be removed from the aquifer and given away as drinking water, as bottled water, or sprayed on golf courses. And I, it's all I know how to do is to make
yeah.
photographs. Then
No,
um, showed them to a publisher, an academic publisher, and they said, "Yeah, we'll do this." So that was 8 years of new photography for the book, and I've watched it, and I have not gone back down there since I finished the photography for the book, because the last three big hurricanes
yeah,
um, to this is a little three recent hurricanes all landed there, and it's so I don't want to say delicate, but I'm sure that the saltwater has now been pushed by the hurricanes so far back up into the wetlands that the fauna, the animals, in a completely different environment. This all now salt, and don't know where they're going to go. So
how did you
I'm
say
just
you
looking at it from,
yeah, did you say you grew up in Clearwater?
yeah,
So when was that? What year were you born?
I was born in 1954.
1954. No, because that's a good that's a really good barometer, isn't it, of change? You know what I mean? Because there's a piece in your book where you talk about the noticeable effect in your lifetime. So, like
Yeah,
where I live, like I said to you earlier, I live in the town that Stonehenge belongs to, which are a section of prehistoric stones that were put there. Um, but in the time, and I kind of lived in and around here most of my life. Certainly from the age of 7. In the town that I live in, Amesbury. is probably 3 times larger than when I was at school, because they just keep building
Mhm.
housing estates. And they've built all of those housing estates on what were the farmers' fields. So it's what I call a barometer. It's like a personal barometer, because I can walk you down a housing estate and tell you what used to be grown in those fields, and that they're not there anymore. They've just disappeared, and the town is probably triple the size that it once was. Um, so what was it like when? What were your early memories growing up in and around Clearwater then?
It was the smallest of the three cities in one area that were all around Tampa Bay, and Tampa and St. Petersburg and Clearwater. And unfortunately, when I was in college, Scientologists bought up a lot of downtown. And long story short, it's been completely smothered. The land has no value anymore because it's all the cult members and
Yeah.
downtown is dead. So that is a very strange thing to see. Um, but the bluff and the hillside on the bay where I grew up is still there, and that's where we played as little kids. Went out into the mud flats and oyster beds and had a lot of fun in wetlands. And my first trip to the wildlife refuge, the Chaswiska, was in 1977, and I'd never seen anything like it. It was only a couple of hours from where I grew up. Completely different coastline, no bluff, and lush, and trees laden with bromeliads and other flowers, just growth on top of growth on top of growth. Couldn't be any more beautiful or lush. And it
Imagine,
was
yeah.
springs coming out of the earth and mixing with, going into brackish areas where certain changes in the salinity will have an effect, and then out into the Gulf. And it was flat going out into the Gulf, remained very shallow for miles out into the Gulf. And I became more fascinated with it as the years went on. I would photograph there regularly. And then in 2014, I hadn't been for a couple of years. Lo and behold, most of the trees were dead. And then I decided to photograph that. So it's been a long trip,
Mm.
and often photographers will work on long-term projects. And when photographs in your project span 47 years, and you kind of you've done it, and you can the publisher, this academic press in Georgia, said to me, "We need you to send us the image file so that we can print the book. You need to stop photographing and um, give us the image files." What I was doing, and I think I heard you mention it. I was doing side by side photographs. I would take an old photograph that I'd made in, let's say, 1988, and find the same camera. The whole project was shot with film, and get the right camera and go and try and find that place and photograph what it looks like now. And that was very difficult because my cameras made in the 70s didn't have GPS, and I had only this, which is not improving. And my eye, and you go to this spot that you think is what you'd photographed in 1988, and you look and you go, "Oh, this is horrible." I mean,
Mm.
when it's side by side comparisons, really show you the speed. And that was most effective. And the publisher really loved that, to have a big chunk in the middle of the book with, I think there are 15 of those pairs of photographs. But it was also really difficult to. Um, I was rubbing my nose into my subject matter by going out there with one of these prints and trying to duplicate it. It was very hard evidence, but
Contrast must have been
it's,
quite horrific.
yeah, because these were the delicate kind of layer on layer with bromeliads and orchids and all these sorts of things, to the starkness of completely salt burned environment was striking. And I did a piece with a university in Georgia, Emory, and they were both scientists. And I love hearing what they have to say about this. They reminded me that just because it's not just the trees. When the trees are gone, the temperature increases, and those small animals that were living back underneath there,
Yeah.
they eat is gone, and they've gone further upstream, and further upstream eventually gets you into the highway and all the cookie cutter homes that are jammed into an area so low that they should never have been built, because they flood also.
Am I right in thinking that Florida has a huge problem with invasive species as well these days?
Well, I haven't had a conversation with anyone about that. There have always been invasive species. Excuse me, there. Um, I would imagine that that is getting worse.
Yeah, because I always see lots of things on YouTube of like the animal rescue people always having to remove iguanas and like boa constrictors and stuff that like they just don't belong in Florida, but people keeping them as pets and then releasing them.
Yeah,
And they,
and that's the sort of thing when you're standing there with your camera and your eye shoved into the ground glass, it doesn't occur to you to remember about, what to look for. You look at alligators,
mm,
cottonmouths, rattlesnakes, certain things like that. You love seeing an otter eating shellfish, but a boa constrictor, if I open the eye that's I'm not using the camera and see something really large, yeah, that would make my heart pitter patter.
I mean, not worried about alligators, but and cottonmouths and rattlesnakes, but
They're there. They're
yeah,
they're all there, and it's one of the reasons. It took me a while with this project to learn to photograph, learn how to get the photograph I wanted, and often you don't want to get out of the canoe because you don't know how, what the bottom is
yeah.
like. You take your paddle and jam it in, and I did this many years ago, and hit something solid and say, cool, I'm in. And you get your gear, you put it there, and you jump in, and what you were hitting was a fallen tree. You weren't hitting the bottom.
Oh,
So I slid off the fallen tree and was in water up to here. I wasn't ready for it. It wasn't dangerous, but I wasn't ready for it. It's also difficult to get back into a canoe.
yeah. It's very Jesus. That must bring up all types of fear.
Um, you rely on your experience. You try not to make
I
stupid
don't have
moves.
any experience of falling off sunken trees, you see, so I'd be buggered.
Well, I would say that my great big warm loving heart was pounding away because I know what the issues are, and you hope you're not really near an alligator nest because
Yeah.
that's going to get mama gator all uh, irritable. Um, so I learned to shoot. I would do that when I was certain about the firmness of the bottom and where it
Yeah.
was. But I also learned to use with my old medium format film camera um, new high speed film. So
Okay.
I would be shooting with a heavy handheld camera um, with a film that didn't exist 20 years ago. And that kind of saved me. Getting better with that film allowed me to shoot from a canoe. And I love to use a tripod and be contemplative and slow moving, but that's great if I'm standing somewhere and it's firm. Otherwise, I'm going to shoot with high speed film.
You still shoot with film?
Yes,
Yeah. And
the
funny enough,
refrigerator.
uh, the chap I told you about, Jason Edwards, he still shoots with film. Yeah.
Something wrong with it.
No,
I
no,
know how to do it.
yeah. The only reason I mention it is because whenever I speak to sort of photographers like yourself and Jason, you use film, you don't use digital. But the only kind of, and I'm not a photographer by any stretch of the imagination, but I remember my dad was an amateur photographer, and I could kind of vaguely remember him with his dark room as a kid, with the sign, "Do not come in." Could he be there developing his film and his many trays of liquid and hanging them up and with pegs and stuff. And so I remember camera rolls and stuff like that, but not being an actual photographer. But obviously I played about with cameras as a kid and as a teenager and stuff. But of course now, if you talk to anybody or go into any camera shop, it's just digital.
I was happy. I live in Asheville, North Carolina now, and I moved here 10 years ago, 2014. Actually, this month, sorry, 11 years ago, um, and didn't know whether I was going to be able to find good supplies and good services, and was happy to find a local guy, not as old as I am, but been around for a while. Very happy to work
Yeah,
on the cameras. And what I've learned over the years, and I've been doing this since the early 70s, is you buy a good camera.
yeah.
Um, I've been using something for 50 years,
Wow.
and I don't really have problems with it. And if you buy a cheap little 35 millimeter digital camera, there's only so many things you can replace in there.
Yeah,
And I know Photoshop because everything in the book had to be scanned and then prepared by me, and then have those files. And I send those files to the publisher. So I know what I'm doing with Photoshop, but I try to keep it very simple.
do you remember when the first camera you picked up?
My mother was a painter, and she used um, cameras for her paintings. And I thought that was interesting. But eventually, my mother gave me a camera, and they were a little Instamatic, uh, cheap Kodak camera. And then eventually, she gave me a 35 millimeter Pentax, probably in 1970. And I really enjoyed it, and I would shoot color negative film just so because I needed to learn how to use the camera. And then eventually, when I went to college, I learned how to do things with black and white, and that was the beginning of it. I moved to New York City and learned everything else I needed to know there.
So what were you doing in New York City then? Because New York City in the 70s must have been a fascinating time.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Um, that was the end of a really bad economic cycle. So you could get a cheap apartment, $250 for about 300 or 400 square feet. And I was able to print there, develop film in the bathroom, and then uh, take the mattress off the bed. I built a platform, and I could print in the bedroom and then sleep on the couch in the living room. But I studied at the International Center of Photography, and quite a few years later ended up teaching there, and had a full life. 38 years I was there.
Oh
It was
wow.
fun, and I moved here because I felt like I'd done that,
Yeah.
and was about to become a very round uh, age or age number, and decided to pivot, move here, and commit more to photography in New York City, whether it was in the 70s or in the aughts, is overwhelming and distracting. And I've been much happier and more productive here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a romanticism about New York in the 70s and the 80s, largely,
I,
I guess, spun by Hollywood and TV. Um, but there's some great cultural history that comes out of New York, and yeah, it was just, as a little child, as a kid growing up in the 70s and the 80s, and watching all of the stuff happening in New York. Um, you get nostalgic and romanticize what it was about, forgetting that people were still having to work 40, 60 hours a week to earn a living and have a job. You know what I mean? You don't think about that. You just think about what you think it looked like. And
and to live in one neighborhood for 38 years, that was, watching it evolve and
yeah,
being somewhat near Riverside Park and Central Park. That it wasn't like you had a yard, but you had a place to get out of your apartment and take a walk. Um, and also just museums and galleries and teaching at places where you could you could audit classes and learn something. That's how I learned digital. I was teaching at the International Center of Photography, and when I wasn't going there to teach a class, I was going there to audit a class with um, people who were good at Photoshop. And that was all new to me. And that meant that I could buy a digital camera and never buy film for it and shoot jobs. And that's not landscape photography at all, but it's a way to get income, to shoot jobs, and to learn um, while you're shooting, learn on the job. Because it's any moron can do it because the image is right there on the back of the camera. And if you set it right, you have a histogram, which shows you where your data is. And if you didn't get it, you can shoot it again. Whereas with film, you have to know that you got
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. That's the thing. When you say shooting jobs, what were they like?
One of my favorite clients was, and they were consistent. It's like 15 years or 20 years I shot for them. The American Academy of Arts and Letters.
Nice.
And that's just what it sounds like. They had a compound in Washington Heights, a neighborhood way uptown near the uh, George Washington Bridge, and in a mixed neighborhood. But there was this neoclassical um, era, setting, a lot of different buildings around it on a courtyard. And they were famous writers, architects, artists, composers, et cetera, et cetera. And I had a friend who worked there and they needed to be photographed regularly. And there was a season like 5 or 6 months of the year, maybe schlepping all my equipment up there and setting it up, a lot of lights and photograph very important people in the arts and thanking them and getting back into the cab with all this gear, four or five cases of equipment, and go back to my little apartment. But eventually they started to pay me more and more. It became more palatable
Yeah,
to do it. At first, it was $200 to shoot these people and get it right on film. And by the time I stopped and moved down here, I was shooting digital and got it. And that's it. I haven't used any of my digital equipment nor my lights in 10 years or more, sitting in the studio.
oh, wow. So
I
do you
don't shoot
just
well.
yeah? Do you still do? Are you still doing photography as a full-time job then?
I'm doing what we would call fine art photography yeah, that's what I've been doing full time since I moved here, working on landscape photographs, exhibiting, teaching. Um, I've been nominated for a very fancy European photography prize that I get to submit my work to, but the submission is not that much different from any other submission. It's just the person who wins gets 100,000 Swiss francs.
Okay.
So I'll do that.
Yeah.
I've got the
That's,
images all selected, and the
but
next part is
that's nice, isn't it? Because I mean, 100,000 Swiss francs is take that. You know, I've already, you've already taken the photograph. So if somebody says, "Oh, by the way,"
the topic is sustainability,
uh,
and they're talking about environmental stability, and this is in my wheelhouse. I'm just going to be uh, try to be as smart as possible about image selection, and then I get to write.
yeah. Do you have a favorite spot
Favorite spot here
anywhere?
or anywhere?
Is there somewhere that that like if there was somewhere like this is the last time I'm going to be able to take a photograph, or you can, yeah, if there was somewhere you had like this is the last chance you're going to get to do it, where would that be?
Um, I would almost say the swamp where I did the book, but the fact is that I haven't been back since I had to stop making photographs for the book in 2022 because they wanted to move on with the producing the book. I haven't been back since then, since my last trip there, but I'm hesitant because I don't know that I really want to see what this place looks like now. I
Yeah,
know what it looked like in 1977 when I first went there, but um, do I want to see what 3 years of hurricanes, 2 years of hurricanes looks like, hurricane damage? No, plus it's everything in that area is growing very, very quickly. And I know what it's going to look like in another few years and another few years and another few years. Um, one thing I like doing, but it's not any good at this time of year, is to photograph here in these mountains. There are some old growth forests a little further west of me here. And one of the drawbacks to the hurricane that came from the Gulf of Mexico up through here is it knocked down a lot of mature trees.
okay,
And those everywhere. I mean, my neighbors' homes had trees through the roof. Roads were blocked for weeks. Parkways, everything, and if things will, if it's a forest that I have been to before, it's not going to look the same. And
yeah,
things here have been drastically different.
yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think. I think it was 1986. There was a massive storm in the UK, and I'm sure it was 1986. I might have that wrong, but it was famous because of um, although it's a windy country, and obviously because we are a windy country, our trees are
Mhm.
quite strong because obviously they're constantly being battled by the wind. So, but we got some winds that were like 100, 120 mile an hour consistently, and it uprooted lots of mature trees. Um, and in the UK, we have a lot of beech trees, especially where I live in this area. Well, actually, they're up and down the country. They're native to the UK. Um,
Mhm.
and but where I live is what's called a chalk place. It's a chalk valley, so the soil is quite shallow. So it's not great soil for you. You don't have to go down far before you just hit a big chalk bed, and so it's not very good for beech trees because they're shallow rooted. And so yeah, so it upended lots of trees that like 200, 300 years old, and it was incredibly it was an incredibly destructive uh, wind. But on the other side of that, in that moment, it looked devastating. But it's amazing how it just bounced back. It's just fascinating how the woodlands, the new growth came, um, and we have there used to be a very common practice in the UK in woodlands called, I'd imagine you have it all around the world to be fair, but it's called coppicing. And they used to cut the wood down, the trees down for fires and making poles, fencing, and stuff like that. So, did you know the practice I mean? It's
No.
so there's certain trees, beech, chestnut, willow, they lend themselves to this practice. So you let them start to grow, and when they get to about 6 inches in diameter, you chop them off at the base, and then it grows more. And you
Okay.
coppice them about every 7 years or about 6 inches, and you end up with what we call the big stools in the ground, and they're just shoots that come up, and just for whatever reason, there's a certain trees that really thrive on it. But what you see, so a lot of woods in the UK, there's quite a few. These are old coppice woods. So a lot of these, and coppice woods can be 3, 4, 500 years old, but they don't look that old. But they got these massive stumps with just loads of like coppice trunks coming up. And the fascinating thing is when you coppice them is all of the regeneration and what and the type of fauna and animals that thrive in these woods, because every 7 years it's cut back to the ground. So the sunlight is always able to penetrate and always able to penetrate again. And of course, we have these also have mature woods, very similar to what you were saying in the mountains that have been there for hundreds of years, where the sun never gets to the ground, especially in the spring and the summer because of the canopy. And so, but it's just the way that woods recover. It's just phenomenal, and everything that moves in like it never happened. And it's woods are one of my favorite places. I'm fascinated by them.
I'm very much looking forward to being able to go. It's a little cold today,
Yeah,
14 degrees, to go to these forests and that are regulated by our National Forest Service, and pretty much left to do what they do. Um, and see, it's one of the reasons why I moved down here from New York was I don't have to go very far at all, to get on a trail and be in mountains and be surrounded by beautiful forests. And the hurricane kept that from happening because you couldn't, the roads were closed.
okay.
And then came winter, and that's where we are. So it's going to be another 3 or 4 months before I can go do that. And I really would love to have a project um, here, nearby, where I can photograph someplace over an extended period of time.
Yeah, I mean, is there must be projects that you can do that are just winter projects. Like, I mean, I don't know because I don't know the area. I've never been to Florida. I don't know Clearwater. But
But I'm in Asheville, North Carolina.
oh, sorry. For some reason, I thought you. Yeah, I think you actually said
No,
that earlier. Yeah,
yeah, it's mountains and rivers, which were really swollen during Helene, and 14 degrees. But it's a beautiful place, and I had spent a lot of time before moving down here visiting and photographing forests like we don't have in Florida.
yeah,
And I've enjoyed that and had my darkroom, and I've finished that project in Florida, and um, happy to find another place that I can just focus on.
yeah. It's trying to think of what would be a potential because I'd imagine over the years there's nothing you haven't taken photographs of.
Um, Jewelry, doing little small stuff in a studio,
Yeah,
um, for, as a paying job. No, I mean, it's one of the things I try to run through my mind is I'm photographing this because I want to, and I
yeah,
love this, versus I'm photographing this because someone's paying me. I have no connection or interest in this thing or these people, um, and therefore I am insisting on being paid well. when I am my own boss and I'm applying 50 years worth of photographic skills, then I'm doing it exactly how I want to do it.
If somebody's listening to this and they want to pick up a camera and start for the first time, what would your advice be to them?
Go ahead and do it. Film is still being made. I have a distant cousin who works at a camera store in Kentucky, which isn't really very close to me here. But he sends me a Ziploc bag from time to time of 10 rolls of a couple of different types of film. Um, and I would suggest that someone who's looking to start photography, find a used camera, even if it's digital. But film is, you're going to learn a lot more about photography if you shoot film and make prints. Is my feeling. You learn about your computer and software if you shoot digital, and that's okay. But I, buying inexpensive used cameras is a great way to start, because it's not that they have no value, it's that there aren't people who want to use medium format film cameras or any film camera. They just don't sell. They're worth very little, so you can go into a camera store and buy something very easily, and you can get all the information you want online
Yeah.
on how to.
In terms of subjects, what would you like? How would you help somebody discover what they want to see?
I think the most important part of that is that's why shooting jobs was never really um, anything I took very seriously. I just learned how to make a good photograph of something. If you're going to commit yourself to photographing things that you're interested in, you should be photographing things that you feel strongly about. If you're not passionate about your subject, then you might as well be shooting jewelry or still life, a bottle of liquor, which could be fun. Um, and I think that's why I the long-term projects that I've done have been the subject was someplace that I'm fascinated by, or a place that I love, and I like going there and being challenged by something that's changed, maybe trees falling down, or God forbid, some coastline, submerging itself. But you have to shoot and shoot and shoot. You can't learn everything quickly, especially with film, because you're out there and you come home and you have to develop, and you can. I used a kitchen sink for many, many years in my first apartment, and for developing film, and I would hang the film up in the bathroom to dry and cut it up, and you can. It doesn't cost a lot to set up one of these. Costs a lot less than buying a new computer
That's
with
true.
all the software you need in it,
That's true.
and,
Um,
and a fancy monitor.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. You definitely need a fancy monitor. Um, just before we finish up, could you just give everybody the name of the book and kind of the
Sure.
photo and the range of photos?
An Unflinching Look, Elegy for Wetlands, and the publisher is the University of Georgia Press. And they said yes. They were the second place I went to, and it's the UGP.org, I'm pretty sure. And it can be bought anywhere around the world and shipped, although it's easier if it's all in the States. It's about 4-hour drive for
Mm.
me down there. But that's the most direct way. They're the publisher, and UGP, and you just type my name up in the search bar at the top, Benjamin Dimmitt, and there it will be.
And in terms of, do you know off the top of your head, like roughly, what the year of the first photograph and the year of the last photograph, even if they're not the same?
Oh, absolutely. As I went deeply into the archives to get the first photograph, to find the first photograph I ever made there, and that was 1977. And the most recent, where I stopped, was 2022. So I think that's 47 years worth of photographs.
Yeah, that is that's that's a good
And
good.
it's a long-term project. Um, the,
I think people are starting to understand when you say a long-term project, you're referring to decades.
yes. And I think what makes the book and what helped the publisher say yes to me is that they're an academic press, and it has to be for real and correct. And I have 3 or 4 other writers contributing to it. I wrote 2 essays, or a primary essay, and then an epilogue, and then there's 4 other writers. So it's been backed up, especially by a very well-known photography writer from Cambridge, who wrote a beautiful essay, a very smart essay. And actually, starting right now, I think today or tomorrow, there's an English landscape website called On Landscape that is running a feature on the book.
Oh,
And
fantastic!
I'm excited about that.
Yeah,
I don't know
no,
if
that's
it's
absolutely fantastic. My last question, and it's completely random. It's not really connected to anything. I'd just like to ask it completely using your imagination. Imagine you had a time machine. Where would you go in history? What car would you drive? And what music would you be listening to?
first thing that came to my mind, because we've been talking about it for an hour, is I would love to see the area I grew up in and that part of Florida, um, uh, let's say 500 years ago, or even 300. I'd like to see it in an unspoiled um, state. It would be fascinating to me, and also to, be able to go to where um, natives, native Floridians. I'm a native Floridian, but I mean 300
Yeah,
years ago, native, um, how they lived and how awful it might have been for mosquitoes and that sort of thing, because that's a big problem. No CMs, that you can't see them, but they bite. They're
yeah.
crazy. They didn't have screens, so how did they do that? Um, and I don't know that I need a car to do that. I think maybe it would be fun to have uh, a a crew, a posse, to paddle me around and show me things. But I'd love to see what that looked like before humans screwed it up,
And
and also what the town of Clearwater um, looked like
yeah,
400 years ago.
it'd just be, yeah, you'd never know. It is one of the most fascinating things because it's you couldn't. There's a point with America that you would only have to go back a few hundred years to see what it was like before anybody turned up. Whereas I was talking to you earlier about Stonehenge, it's been here thousands of years, and there's monuments that precede that. So there's no way to see anywhere in the UK in the last 10,000 years that doesn't have some form of human interaction.
And I've been to Stonehenge, and I was very surprised, and it was wonderful. And I was chuckling to myself just a moment ago, wondering um, what monuments would be covered over by debris and mud and
Loads.
whatever else in Florida. In you know, they have been things that were of no value and were shoved into the bay or tossed into a lake or a pond or a sinkhole.
Oh, yeah, just unimaginable amounts. Just you couldn't put a number on it because the same thing has happened in the UK. Every time they dig something up, they discover something under it, and you just realise we've just carried on. I mean, the Roman baths in Bath is a fantastic example, as they built an entire city on it, and then I don't remember when it was. It was a long, long time ago. They started excavating some of it, and they found an entire Roman baths all intact, and you can walk around it today, and people just started building on top of it originally, and the same thing happens in London everywhere. Yeah.
And in Florida, no one cared. It was about where could we put cattle,
Yeah.
where could we plant oranges, and how do we get rid of all the Native Americans? So,
So we
but
have
there were spring.
there's a place in Ainsbury called Archer's Gate, and it's named after the Ainsbury Archer because those fields that I was telling you about that I used to be able to walk up as a child, when they started turning one of them to a housing estate, they started obviously digging up to put in all the groundworks, and they discovered this prehistoric archer in the ground, burial ground. So, I mean, in his memory, they named it Archer's Gate after him. But yeah, he was there with his arrow. I think he'd been murdered or something, but he was there in this little grave and in the middle of a field that had been ploughed and farmed for years and years, but nobody had ever dug down deep enough. And you would like I said, it's he would have been connected to Stonehenge. He would have been, you know, like I mean, it's well preserved and they've got all the information they could get. But there's now an entire housing estate, and for all they know, 50 meters away there could have been another 20 burial. Nobody knows, and I think that applies everywhere you go. You know, but
I, I believe it, and I'm curious to see how people would have survived because there were native. I had to do research for the book, and there were Native Americans living there going back a long, long way at the swamp in Florida. Um, it was a great place to fish.
yeah, it would have been it have been an incredible diverse sort of biodiverse, but would have been a great provider of food. You know,
Yeah.
you would it would have been an endless. It would have been the sort of modern the ancient version of a hypermarket and a supermarket and shopping mall all combined into one. You know, but that's a great place to stop. Thank you very much for your time. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks very much. Nice to meet you.
And you. And there you go. That was Benjamin. And as often happens, we had a quick chat afterwards, and he explained a little bit about how his mum, and I missed this when when I was talking to him, but his mum being the painter and how she would sit him in the corner and he'd have to be quiet, and while he kind of observed his mum painting and then occasionally he'd say, "What's that supposed to be a picture of?" And his mum would say, "Pictures don't have to be of anything." And yeah, it was an interesting insight, which I wish I'd picked up on when I was talking to him, because I said to him afterwards that one of the things he's done, which I think is amazing and absolutely incredible, that I fully respect him for, is he has gone back every so often since the 70s and taken pictures of the same thing. That it's been a lifelong project. Whether that was intended or not is what it turned into. And very few of us have ever had that level of insight, accidentally or on purpose, of stopping, observing, and being aware of the changes in our life and documenting them for want of a better term. But it was really nice. Please do check out the book. The links are in the description. And as always, thank you everybody that watches, subscribes, listens, and shares. And as always, wherever you are from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed. Thank you.